Your place is in the kitchen. Those were the last words my husband said to me before he left our house with another woman. 37 minutes later, he watched me walk onto the stage at the grand opening of Charleston's newest luxury hotel. The same hotel he thought belonged to someone else. The same hotel he had proudly brought his mistress to impress. And the moment I stepped behind the podium, the color drained from his face. My name is Natalie Brooks, and 2 months after giving birth to my son, I learned that the greatest betrayals don't always happen behind closed doors. Sometimes they happen in broad daylight. Sometimes they happen while you're still healing from childbirth. Sometimes they happen when the person who promised to love you forever looks you in the eye and decides you've become invisible. That Friday morning began with my baby crying. Noah's tiny voice drifted through the baby monitor just after 6. I pushed myself out of bed, every movement reminding me my body still wasn't fully my own. 2 months wasn't enough time to recover from a difficult delivery despite what social media seemed to suggest. I picked him up from his crib and held him against my shoulder. "Good morning, sweetheart." He settled almost instantly. There was something peaceful about those early mornings. No emails, no meetings, no expectations. Just me and my little boy. For a few minutes the world felt simple. Then I heard laughter downstairs. A woman's laughter. I glanced at the clock. Ryan wasn't supposed to have anyone over. Not today. Especially not today. I kissed Noah's forehead before carrying him downstairs. Halfway down the staircase, I stopped. Ryan stood in the kitchen making coffee. Beside him stood Amber. Tall. Perfect hair. Designer sunglasses resting on her head even though we were inside. She looked like she was posing for a lifestyle magazine instead of standing in another woman's kitchen. Ryan smiled when he saw me. Not warmly. More like someone amused by an inconvenience. "There you are." Amber looked me up and down. "Oh." Her smile barely moved. "So this is Natalie." I simply nodded. I wasn't interested in introducing myself to the woman who had been texting my husband after midnight for weeks. Ryan didn't even try to hide it anymore. Instead, he acted like I was the one making things awkward. Amber picked up her latte. "I'll wait outside." She walked toward the front door like she'd been there 100 times before. The silence she left behind was almost louder than her voice. Ryan sighed dramatically. "What?" I looked directly at him. "You're bringing her," he shrugged. "It's networking." "To the grand opening?" "Exactly." His answer landed like a slap. I stared at the man I'd been married to for 9 years. The father of my child. The man who once slept in hospital chairs while I recovered from emergency surgery years earlier. Somewhere along the way, he had become someone I barely recognized. I quietly turned toward the living room, intending to avoid another argument. "Natalie." I stopped. "What? Weren't you getting dressed?" "I am." He laughed. "For what?" I frowned. "The hotel." He actually burst into laughter. Not a chuckle. Not nervous laughter. The kind that made him bend slightly at the waist. "You." His eyes watered from laughing. "You think you're invited to the grand opening of that luxury hotel?" I looked at him without answering. He continued. "Natalie, that's a 5-star hotel." "I know." "The mayor's going." "I know." "Investors." "I know." "Business leaders." "I know." He shook his head like I simply wasn't understanding. Then he said the sentence that would echo in my mind all day. "Your place is in the kitchen." For a moment, neither of us spoke. I thought about the nights I'd stayed awake feeding Noah while Ryan claimed he had early meetings. The weekends he'd suddenly become too busy. The perfume that wasn't mine. The secret smiles at his phone. I realized something. He truly believed those words. He didn't say them to hurt me. He said them because he believed they described who I was. Amber opened the front door. "Honey," Ryan called back. "Coming." Before leaving, he looked me over. I was wearing a navy blue dress I'd bought months before Noah was born. Simple, elegant, comfortable enough after pregnancy. Ryan smirked. "Seriously, what? Why are you all dressed up?" "I'm going to the hotel." He laughed again. Amber stepped inside just enough to hear the conversation. Ryan wrapped an arm around her waist. "You think you're invited?" Amber smiled sympathetically. "Oh, Natalie." "Maybe today you should stay home." Ryan nodded. "Exactly," Amber added. "The baby's only 2 months old." Ryan looked at me one last time. "Go home." Then he corrected himself with another grin. "I mean, stay home. Take care of Noah. Leave business to people who actually belong there." He kissed Amber in front of me. Not quickly. Not accidentally. Deliberately. like he wanted me to see it. Then they walked out together. The front door closed. The house became painfully quiet. For several seconds, I simply stood there, not crying, not yelling, just breathing. Noah made a tiny sound from my shoulder. I looked down, his little fingers wrapped around one of mine. I smiled despite everything. It's okay. I wasn't sure whether I was talking to him, or myself. An hour later, my mother arrived. My mom, Linda, had insisted on watching Noah during the ceremony. She took one look at my face. What happened? I forced a smile. Nothing I didn't already know. She frowned. Ryan, I nodded once. She didn't ask another question. She'd never liked how distant he'd become after Noah was born. Instead, she kissed my cheek. You go! I've got my grandson. I hugged her tightly. Thank you. As I reached the front door, she called after me. Natalie. I turned. No matter what happens today, I'm proud of you. Those words nearly broke me. Not because I doubted myself, because I suddenly realized how long it had been since my own husband had said anything remotely similar. I climbed into my car. The drive into downtown Charleston took about 25 minutes. Traffic was heavier than usual. News vans filled the streets surrounding the historic district. Banners with the hotel's elegant gold logo hung from every lamppost. People were dressed in suits, cocktail dresses, and evening wear despite the afternoon sun. Everyone wanted to witness the opening of the city's newest luxury destination. As I approached the entrance, I spotted Ryan. He was helping Amber out of his SUV. She laughed as photographers snapped pictures of arriving guests. Ryan looked happier than I'd seen him in months. He never noticed my car. I parked several buildings away. I picked up my invitation from the passenger seat. Not the gold guest invitation. A black leather credential embossed with only 2 words. Owner. I slipped it into my purse. Instead of joining the crowd at the front entrance, I quietly walked around the side of the building, toward the private executive entrance. The security guard standing outside the executive entrance smiled the moment he saw me. Good afternoon, Ms. Brooks. His voice carried the same respect I'd heard from him for nearly 3 years. I smiled back. Afternoon, David. He held the glass door open. Everyone's been waiting for you. As I stepped inside, the noise from the crowd outside disappeared almost instantly. The private corridor behind the lobby felt calm, almost insulated from the excitement building in the ballroom. A young assistant hurried toward me. Ms. Brooks, Mr. Hill is in the conference room. I'll be there in a minute. She nodded and hurried away. I stopped in front of a large window overlooking the front entrance. From there, I could see everything. Ryan stood confidently beside Amber as photographers snapped pictures of arriving guests. Amber adjusted her expensive emerald dress before smiling for another camera. Ryan looked proud, like he belonged there, like he'd finally made it into Charleston's upper business circle. Neither of them had the slightest idea they were standing in front of my hotel. 4 years earlier, this building had looked nothing like it did today. Broken windows, rotting floors, water stains across every ceiling. Most people saw an abandoned building that should have been demolished. I saw my grandfather. He'd owned the old Charleston House Hotel for almost 40 years. As a little girl, I spent summers sitting beside him in the lobby while he greeted every guest by name. He used to tell me, luxury isn't about crystal chandeliers. It's about making people feel like they matter. Back then, I didn't understand. Years later, those words became the foundation of everything I built. When Grandpa passed away, everyone expected him to leave the property to my uncle. Instead, he left it to me. My uncle wasn't pleased. Neither were several relatives. Some quietly suggested Grandpa hadn't been thinking clearly near the end. Others believed I'd sell the property within months. Even Ryan looked surprised. We should unload it, he told me one evening while we walked through the abandoned lobby. The land alone is worth a fortune. I ran my hand across one of the cracked marble columns. I don't want to sell. He laughed softly. You can't seriously rebuild this place. I can. Natalie. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders. Sometimes knowing when to walk away is smarter. I smiled. Sometimes, but I never walked away. The first bank rejected my proposal after 12 minutes. The second rejected it after reviewing my financial statements. The third loan officer looked almost apologetic. The restoration costs are simply too high. I drove home that afternoon wondering whether everyone else was right. Maybe I was chasing a dream that belonged to another generation. That evening I sat alone inside the abandoned hotel. Dust floated through broken sunlight. The building felt almost alive. I could still imagine guests checking in, families laughing, wedding receptions. Holiday dinners. I whispered into the empty lobby. I'm not giving up. No one answered. But somehow, the silence felt like encouragement. Instead of selling the property, I created a family trust exactly as Grandpa had suggested years earlier. He'd insisted every important family asset remain protected. At the time, I thought he was simply planning ahead. Now I understood. The trust allowed me to secure private investment without placing ownership at risk. It wasn't easy. Some investors walked away. Others wanted controlling interest. I refused. I wasn't rebuilding someone else's dream. I was protecting my grandfather's legacy. Eventually, a small group believed in my vision. We had enough to begin. Barely. For the next 3 years, my life became construction schedules, permit meetings, architectural reviews, historic preservation approvals, budget revisions, insurance inspections, fundraising dinners, and endless setbacks. There were mornings I arrived before sunrise and left long after dark. Most days, Ryan never asked how things were going. At first, that hurt. Eventually, I stopped expecting him to ask. Whenever he noticed blueprints covering the dining room table, he'd joke. Still playing hotel owner? I'd smile politely. Inside, it stung more than I admitted. Hey. Then I became pregnant. The timing couldn't have been worse. Or better, depending on how I looked at it. Ryan seemed genuinely excited. For a while. He painted the nursery. He talked about teaching our son baseball. He even attended doctor's appointments. I remember thinking, maybe we'd found our way back to each other. Then during my 27th week, everything changed. I collapsed during a meeting with the architects. The emergency room became my world. The doctors diagnosed severe pregnancy complications, strict bed rest, no unnecessary stress, no long workdays, no climbing construction sites. I cried the entire drive home, not because I feared for the hotel, because I feared losing my baby. The hotel could wait. Noah couldn't. That's when Marcus Hill stepped in. Marcus had spent 22 years managing luxury properties across the Southeast. I'd hired him almost a year before construction finished. He wasn't just experienced. He understood people. When I apologized for leaving everything in his hands, he smiled. You're not leaving. You're becoming a mother. The hotel will still be here. You only get one chance to welcome your son into the world. I never forgot those words. For months, Marcus called me every evening. He walked through every construction update, every staffing decision, every vendor contract. Sometimes we'd spend 2 hours reviewing details after Noah kicked me awake for the 3rd time that night. Not once did Marcus make me feel guilty. He simply reminded me, we're building this together. Ryan saw those phone calls. He assumed Marcus was handling everything because I couldn't. Technically, he wasn't wrong. But he never once asked why Marcus always called me, or why every major decision still came through me. He simply lost interest. Gradually, his business trips became more frequent. His late nights became normal. His phone stayed face down. When Noah was born, Ryan held him with tears in his eyes. For one beautiful moment, I thought we'd become a family again. That illusion lasted less than 3 weeks. He became distant, always working, always distracted, always texting. One night while feeding Noah at 2 a.m, Ryan's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. The screen lit up. Amber, can't stop thinking about tonight. I stared at the message, then quietly turned the phone back over. I didn't scream. I didn't wake him. I simply looked down at my sleeping son and promised him something. No matter what happened between his father and me, he would grow up in a home where respect mattered. Even if that home eventually belonged to only one parent. A gentle knock interrupted my thoughts. I turned from the window. Marcus stood outside the conference room holding 2 coffee cups. He smiled warmly. I figured you'd skip breakfast again. I laughed softly. You know me too well. He handed me 1 cup. You look nervous. I am. You shouldn't be. He glanced toward the ballroom where hundreds of guests were gathering. They're about to meet the woman who saved this building. I looked down into my coffee. I'm not interested in applause. I know. I just want Grandpa to be proud. Marcus smiled. I think he already is. His assistant stepped into the hallway. Mr. Hill, we're ready. Marcus looked at me. One last question. I nodded. Do we begin? I took a slow breath, then smiled. Let's begin. Marcus and I stood behind the ballroom doors while the opening music echoed through the hotel. I couldn't see the audience yet. I could only hear them. Hundreds of conversations blended together with the clinking of champagne glasses and the soft notes of a string quartet. The atmosphere felt elegant, Exactly as I'd imagined it during countless sleepless nights. Marcus adjusted his tie. Everything's running on schedule. I expected nothing less. He smiled. You know, the staff has a little bet going. Oh. They're trying to guess whether you'll cry during your speech. I laughed. I hope not. I told them you'd make it to at least the second page. I don't even have pages. You memorized it? I've lived it. Marcus nodded. Fair enough. A stage manager stepped over with a headset. Ms. Brooks. Yes. We're about 12 minutes out. I'll be ready. She smiled and disappeared. I took one long breath. 4 years. 4 years had led to the next 12 minutes. Meanwhile, outside in the ballroom, Ryan was having the time of his life. I didn't witness it firsthand. I learned later from staff members and security footage. But I could picture every second because it sounded exactly like the Ryan I had come to know. He walked confidently from table to table, introducing Amber as if she already belonged among Charleston's business elite. Amber accepted compliments about her dress with practiced grace. She laughed at jokes. She shook hands. She acted like she'd spent her whole life attending luxury hotel openings. Ryan loved every minute of it. One of the developers asked, So how did you get invited? Ryan smiled proudly. I've been doing some work with people connected to the project. That wasn't exactly true. He'd submitted one proposal months earlier. It had never been accepted. But Ryan had always been good at making possibilities sound like accomplishments. Amber squeezed his arm. My father's been talking to investors. Ryan nodded eagerly. There are some exciting opportunities. He enjoyed sounding important. He always had. Oh. Near the back of the ballroom sat local reporters, city council members, tourism officials, and dozens of Charleston business owners. Many of them already knew me. Most had never met Ryan, which meant no one questioned his confidence. The room slowly filled. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm light across polished marble floors. Fresh white roses lined every table. The scent reminded me of my grandmother's garden. Every detail had been intentional. Every piece of furniture. Every painting. Every fabric, every light fixture, I'd approved them all. Even while recovering from childbirth, I'd reviewed upholstery samples from my living room sofa with Noah sleeping beside me. People often imagine luxury as effortless. It never is. Luxury is thousands of invisible decisions no guest will ever notice unless they're done wrong. A few minutes before the ceremony, Ryan wandered toward the rear of the ballroom. He wanted another drink. That's when he saw me. I was sitting quietly beside Marcus's assistant near one of the side aisles. I wasn't wearing a name badge. I wasn't surrounded by executives. I looked like any other guest waiting for the program to begin. Ryan frowned. He walked over. Natalie. I looked up. Hi. You actually came. I said I would. He glanced around. How'd you get in? I had an invitation. He laughed. They're giving those things away now. I simply smiled. Amber joined him moments later. There you are. Then she noticed me. Oh. Her smile became noticeably colder. You found a seat. I did. Amber leaned slightly toward Ryan, not bothering to lower her voice enough. I thought security was screening guests. Ryan shrugged. They probably missed one. Neither of them asked why I looked calm. They expected tears, or anger, or pleading. Instead, I simply folded my hands in my lap. Ryan looked at his watch. The ceremony's about to start. He looked back at me. After this, we should probably talk. About what? Our situation. Our marriage. I nodded once. I agree. He seemed relieved. I figured you would. He interpreted my calmness as surrender. He had no idea it came from certainty. Amber smiled sweetly. Good. That'll make everything easier. I looked at her. For who? She opened her mouth but didn't answer. A hotel employee approached. Ladies and gentlemen, the ceremony will begin in 1 minute. Ryan smiled confidently. We've got seats closer to the front. He glanced at me. You probably won't see much from back here. I'll be fine. He and Amber walked away. Neither of them looked back. Marcus appeared beside me a few seconds later. You okay? I am now. He followed my gaze toward Ryan. Still want him here? Yes, Marcus raised an eyebrow. Absolutely. He deserves to hear every word. Marcus gave a small nod. No surprises from us. No public humiliation. He smiled knowingly. That's never been your style. It still isn't. Revenge had crossed my mind. Of course it had. I was human. After everything Ryan had done, every lie, every late night, every insult, watching security escort him out would have been satisfying. For about 5 minutes. But then what? My grandfather hadn't taught me to destroy people. He taught me to let truth speak for itself. Truth lasts longer than revenge. The ballroom lights dimmed. Conversations slowly faded. The master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage, a polished man in his 60s with decades of experience hosting civic events. He smiled warmly. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for a very special day in Charleston." Polite applause followed. He continued. "For years, this historic property stood empty. Many believed it was beyond saving." He paused. "But today, it begins a new chapter." Applause grew louder. Ryan leaned back comfortably in his chair. Amber crossed her legs elegantly. Neither paid much attention. They assumed speeches would be predictable. Investors, architects, ribbon cutting, champagne, photos, home. Instead, the host continued. This remarkable restoration was made possible by hundreds of dedicated professionals. We'd like to recognize our construction partners. One by one, project leaders stood. The audience applauded. Then came the design team, the preservation committee, the hospitality consultants. Each received recognition. Ryan clapped politely, still completely relaxed. Then the host smiled. "And now, I have the privilege of introducing the person whose vision made this entire project possible." Ryan stopped clapping. He assumed an investment executive was about to appear. "So please join me in welcoming—" He looked toward the wings. "The owner of Charleston House Hotel." Ryan smiled casually. "Ms. Natalie Brooks." Silence. Not dramatic silence, confused silence. Ryan blinked. Amber frowned. What did he say? The host repeated it. "Please welcome owner and founder, Ms. Natalie Brooks." Ryan slowly turned toward the side entrance. I stood. Marcus offered me his hand. I accepted it. Then he quietly stepped aside. Every executive standing near the stage rose to their feet. The general manager, department heads, architects, city officials who knew me personally. One by one, they applauded. The applause spread across the ballroom. Guests stood. More applause. Ryan didn't. He couldn't. His mouth slowly opened. Amber stared at me as if she'd seen a ghost. I walked calmly toward the stage. No rushing. No anger. No triumph. Just one steady step after another. As I passed Ryan's table, our eyes met. For the first time in years, he looked at me like he was seeing me. Not as his wife. Not as Noah's mother. But as someone he had never bothered to understand. His face turned completely pale. I climbed the steps. The master of ceremonies handed me the microphone. The ballroom fell perfectly still. I smiled at the audience. Then I began to speak. I looked out across the ballroom. Hundreds of faces stared back at me. Some smiled politely. Some looked curious. A few seemed confused. And then there was Ryan. He hadn't moved. Amber still sat beside him, but the confidence she'd worn all afternoon had vanished. She looked back and forth between me and the giant screen displaying the hotel's logo behind me, trying to understand what had just happened. I adjusted the microphone. For a brief second, I thought about every speech I'd rewritten over the past month. Every version had sounded too formal, too rehearsed, too corporate. None of them felt right. So I folded the printed speech I'd brought with me and placed it on the podium without opening it. I'd speak from my heart. "Good afternoon." My voice echoed through the ballroom. "Thank you all for being here today." The audience responded with warm applause. When I was 8 years old, my grandfather gave me my very first job in this building. A few people smiled. He paid me $5 every Saturday. Soft laughter drifted through the room. My responsibilities were incredibly important. Another pause. I watered the plants. More laughter. And if I did a really good job, I was promoted to feeding the goldfish. The room relaxed immediately. I smiled. My grandfather believed that every job mattered. He never called anyone just anything. Just a housekeeper. Just a dishwasher. Just a receptionist. He believed every person who walked through these doors carried part of the hotel's reputation. I saw several members of our housekeeping staff wiping away tears. Many of them had worked alongside me since the earliest renovation days. They knew exactly how much those words meant. I continued. People often ask me what it takes to build a luxury hotel. They expect me to talk about marble imported from Italy, or custom furniture, or expensive chandeliers. I shook my head. Those things are beautiful, but they aren't luxury. I looked toward the back of the room where dozens of hotel employees stood proudly in uniform. Luxury is the housekeeper who notices a guest forgot their wedding ring and spends an hour helping them find it. It's the maintenance technician who comes in on Christmas morning because a family has no hot water. It's the front desk clerk who remembers an elderly couple's anniversary every year. The greatest luxury is being treated like you matter. The applause lasted much longer this time. I waited for it to fade before speaking again. 4 years ago, this building was nearly demolished. The easiest decision would have been selling the property. A lot of people advised me to do exactly that. I smiled softly. Some of them genuinely wanted to help. Others simply believed I wasn't capable. I didn't need to look at Ryan. I could feel his eyes on me. I was told the project was too expensive, too complicated, too risky. I was told I should let someone more experienced take over. I paused. I listened carefully. Then I politely ignored them. Laughter and applause filled the ballroom again. But I also learned something much more valuable. Not everyone who doubts you is your enemy, and not everyone who encourages you is your friend. The room grew quiet. Sometimes, the people closest to us fail to see what we're capable of. They don't mean to. Sometimes they simply stop looking. I finally turned my head, only slightly, just enough to let my eyes rest on Ryan for one brief moment. I didn't point at him. I didn't embarrass him. I didn't have to. He lowered his eyes almost immediately. Then I looked back at the audience. The hardest part of building this hotel wasn't finding investors. It wasn't construction delays. It wasn't surviving the financial uncertainty. It wasn't even managing the project while pregnant. A murmur spread through the crowd. Many people hadn't known that. The hardest part was believing in myself when someone I loved no longer believed in me. Silence. Real silence. No glasses clinking. No whispers. Nothing. For several seconds you could have heard a pin drop. Then I smiled again. But here's what life has taught me. You don't become stronger because someone else believes in you. You become stronger because you keep believing in yourself. The applause came slowly this time. Not loud. Not explosive. Just sincere. The kind of applause that comes from people who recognize something true. I thanked the architects, the engineers, the preservation board, the city inspectors who had patiently worked through every permit. Then I turned toward Marcus. I also owe more than I can ever repay to one extraordinary professional. Marcus looked almost embarrassed. Marcus Hill. Would you please stand? The ballroom erupted. Marcus reluctantly stood shaking his head as everyone applauded. For nearly a year, Marcus carried this project while I was on bed rest. When my son was born 2 months ago, he reminded me that no hotel could ever be more important than becoming a mother. Marcus smiled quietly. I've never forgotten that. The applause continued. I noticed Ryan staring at Marcus with complete confusion. For the first time, he seemed to understand why Marcus had always called me, why every decision had gone through me. The puzzle pieces were finally fitting together. Too late. I finished my speech by looking toward the enormous windows overlooking Charleston Harbor. My grandfather used to tell me, buildings don't create memories. People do. I hope every family that walks through these doors feels welcomed. I hope every employee feels respected. And I hope this hotel reminds all of us that kindness is never old-fashioned. I stepped back from the microphone. The ballroom stood as one. The standing ovation lasted nearly a full minute. I wasn't expecting it. Honestly, I wasn't sure I deserved it. I had simply told the truth. As the applause slowly faded, the master of ceremonies returned to the stage. He thanked everyone before inviting city officials to join me for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Photographers crowded toward the stage. Television cameras rolled. Questions began flying almost immediately. Miss Brooks, what inspired the restoration? How many employees have you hired? Will there be another location? I answered patiently, one interview after another. Meanwhile, guests began circulating through the lobby for refreshments. That's when Ryan finally made his move. I saw him weaving through the crowd, his face pale, his tie slightly loosened. Amber called after him. Ryan! He ignored her. He reached the velvet rope separating the media area from the public reception. I'm her husband. The words came out hurried. I need to speak with Natalie. Before I could even react, David, the same security guard who had welcomed me through the executive entrance earlier, stepped forward politely. I'm sorry, sir. This area is reserved for hotel executives and credentialed media. Ryan frowned. You don't understand. I'm her husband. David's expression remained calm. I understand, sir. But Ms. Brooks is in the middle of scheduled interviews. You'll need to wait. Ryan glanced toward me. Natalie. His voice carried across the lobby. I turned. For a second, our eyes met again. The man who had told me only hours earlier that my place was in the kitchen now stood behind a rope, unable to reach me inside the hotel I owned. I walked toward him. He looked relieved. David stepped aside just enough to let us speak without disturbing the guests. Ryan swallowed hard. "Natalie," his voice cracked. I didn't know." I looked at him quietly. "I know." He searched my face for anger, for satisfaction, for revenge. He found none. "I have interviews waiting," I said it gently. "If you'll excuse me." I turned and walked back toward the reporters. Behind me, I heard Ryan whisper almost to himself. God, what have I done? For the rest of that afternoon, I barely had a moment to myself. One interview turned into another. Local television stations wanted to hear the story behind the restoration. Hospitality magazines wanted photographs. City officials asked me about future investments in Charleston's historic district. By the time the ribbon-cutting ceremony ended, my feet ached, my voice was tired, and all I wanted was to go home and hold Noah. As Marcus and I walked toward the executive offices, he smiled. "You survived," I laughed. "Barely. You were incredible. I just told the truth." That's exactly why people believed every word. He paused before opening his office door. "Ryan waited outside for almost an hour." "I know. He asked if I'd convince you to see him. And I told him that wasn't my decision." I nodded. "Thank you." Marcus gave me a sympathetic look. "Whatever happens now, don't let anyone rush you." "I won't." That evening, I drove home just before sunset. Mom was sitting on the porch with Noah sleeping peacefully in her arms. The moment I stepped out of the car, she smiled. "I watched the whole thing on television." "Oh, you made your grandfather proud." I felt my throat tighten. "Thanks, Mom." She handed Noah to me. The second he settled into my arms, the noise from the entire day disappeared. His tiny fingers wrapped around my necklace. His sleepy little yawn made me laugh. Did he behave? He was an angel. Mom studied my face. "And Ryan?" "He knows." She sighed quietly. "I suppose he does." Neither of us said anything else. There wasn't much left to say. Ryan didn't come home that night. Or the next. On Sunday afternoon, he finally sent a text. "Can we talk?" I looked at the message for several minutes before locking my phone. I wasn't ready. Not yet. The story spread much faster than I expected. By Monday morning, local news stations had picked it up. Then regional media. Then national business websites. Most headlines focused on the restoration. A few mentioned the surprise reveal during the grand opening. One headline simply read, "Luxury hotel owner reveals herself." During opening ceremony, after years behind the scenes. I appreciated that. It wasn't about humiliating Ryan. It was about the hotel. Exactly as Grandpa would have wanted. Ryan unfortunately couldn't escape the attention. Charleston isn't a large city when it comes to business. People talk. Contractors talk even more. By Wednesday, several people had quietly asked why he'd brought another woman to the grand opening of his wife's hotel. His answers changed depending on who asked. Some people noticed. That made things worse. The biggest surprise came 3 days later. Amber's father requested a meeting with Ryan. I didn't hear about it directly. Ryan told me himself weeks later. Apparently, Mr. Whitaker had been furious. Not because of the affair. Because Ryan had embarrassed everyone connected to him. According to Ryan, the conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. Mr. Whitaker looked across his office and said, "If this is how you handle your personal life, I have no interest in trusting you with my business." Every future project Ryan hoped to receive disappeared before he'd ever signed a contract. Amber called him later that evening. "I think we need some space." He asked if they could talk. She refused. By the weekend, she'd blocked his number. The woman he'd risked everything for disappeared almost as quickly as she'd arrived. Meanwhile, life at home settled into a quiet routine. Every morning began with Noah. Feedings, diaper changes, laundry, lullabies. Every afternoon, I'd spend several hours at the hotel before returning home. The executive team insisted I keep a reasonable schedule. Marcus practically ordered me to leave by 3 every afternoon. "The hotel needs its owner." He'd grin. "But your son needs his mom more." I never argued. 3 weeks passed before I agreed to meet Ryan. He suggested a coffee shop halfway between my house and his temporary apartment. I arrived first. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. He looked thinner. His beard had grown unevenly. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes. He carried none of the confidence I'd seen at the grand opening. He sat down quietly. "Thanks for coming." I nodded. You wanted to talk. I did. For almost 30 seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he looked down at his coffee. I've replayed that day 1,000 times. I remained silent. I keep hearing myself. He swallowed hard. Your place is in the kitchen. He closed his eyes briefly. I actually said that. Yes, I don't even recognize the man who said it. I looked at him carefully. I think you do. His shoulders slumped. You're right. I became someone I never thought I'd become. Another long silence followed. Then he asked the question I knew had been coming. Why didn't you tell me? I thought about it before answering. I did. He frowned. What? I talked about the hotel for years. I invited you to site visits. I asked your opinion. I celebrated every permit, every financing milestone, every construction phase. You just stopped listening. His eyes filled with regret. I know what you thought. You thought it was a hobby. You thought someone else was making the decisions. You thought I couldn't build something like that. He didn't deny it, because he couldn't. I was wrong. Yes, I was incredibly wrong. He rubbed both hands together. I've apologized to everyone. My parents, my sister, my business partners, but none of those apologies matter. They don't. He looked directly at me. I'm sorry, Natalie. For all of it. Not because I lost contracts. Not because Amber left. Not because everyone knows. I've spent every day realizing how badly I failed the one person who always believed in me. I studied him carefully. His voice wasn't defensive. It wasn't manipulative. It was broken, maybe for the first time in years. Ryan wasn't trying to win. He was simply telling the truth. I forgive you. His head lifted. You do. I do. Tears immediately filled his eyes. But forgiveness isn't the same thing as trust. His expression slowly changed. I know. Our marriage ended long before that ceremony. It ended one small choice at a time. The lies. The disrespect. The loneliness. I can't build a marriage on memories. He nodded slowly. I understand. Then came the hardest question. He looked down at the table before speaking. What about Noah? I smiled softly. What about him? I don't want him growing up without a father. I leaned forward. Then don't make him. He stared at me. You'll always be his father. That will never change. But you'll have to earn the kind of father he deserves. His eyes overflowed. I will. I promise. I believed he meant it. Whether he could actually keep that promise, only time would tell. As we stood to leave, Ryan hesitated. Natalie. Yes, thank you. For letting me apologize. I gave him a small smile. I hope someday you become the man Noah will be proud to call Dad. Then I walked away. For the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. I simply felt free. Life didn't magically become easier after that conversation. It simply became honest. For the first time in years, I wasn't pretending everything was fine. I wasn't waiting for Ryan to come home. I wasn't wondering who he was texting. I wasn't trying to convince myself that another excuse would somehow fix what had already been broken. Instead, I focused on the only future that truly mattered. Noah's. The divorce process began about a month later. Friends expected a courtroom battle. Charleston isn't exactly a city where people ignore high-profile stories. Several attorneys even contacted me offering to represent me if I wanted to make an example of Ryan. One lawyer actually said, we could destroy him. I thanked him for his time. Then I declined. Destroying Ryan wouldn't rebuild my family. It wouldn't help Noah sleep through the night. It wouldn't make me happier. It certainly wouldn't make my grandfather proud. My goal had never been revenge for the sake of revenge. I wanted accountability. There was a difference. Ryan hired his own attorney. To my surprise, the process remained remarkably civil. We divided our assets fairly. There were difficult conversations. A few emotional moments, but no screaming. No public accusations. No attempts to punish each other. When the paperwork was finally signed, the judge looked at both of us. I wish every couple understood that children remember how their parents treated each other long after the marriage ends. Those words stayed with me. Ryan kept the promise he had made in the coffee shop. Not perfectly, but consistently. Every Tuesday evening he came to the house to spend time with Noah. Every Saturday morning he took him to the park. At first, Noah was too young to understand. He simply smiled whenever someone held him. But as the months passed, I noticed something changing in Ryan. He stopped talking about work. Stopped trying to impress people. Stopped pretending success meant expensive cars or influential friends. Instead, he learned how to warm baby bottles. He mastered diaper changes. He read bedtime stories with ridiculous character voices that made Noah laugh so hard he'd hiccup. One afternoon, I overheard Ryan talking to our son while changing his diaper. "You know, buddy, I've made a lot of mistakes. I hope someday you're smarter than your dad." I stood quietly outside the nursery door. For the first time in a long while, I believed he was becoming the father Noah deserved. Charleston House Hotel flourished. Within 6 months, our occupancy rates exceeded every projection. Travel magazines praised the restoration. Wedding reservations filled the calendar nearly a year in advance. One elderly couple checked in during the Christmas season. As they admired the lobby, the husband smiled at me. "This place feels like it has a soul." I thanked him. Then I thought about Grandpa. He would have loved hearing that. Marcus eventually became more than my general manager. He became family, not because of business, because he'd stood beside me during one of the hardest seasons of my life without ever asking for recognition. One afternoon, we stood together on the rooftop terrace overlooking Charleston Harbor. He handed me a cup of coffee. "So, you finally built the hotel?" I smiled. "No." He looked confused. "We built the hotel." He laughed. "I was wondering how long it'd take you to say that." Almost a year after the grand opening, Charleston's Chamber of Commerce held its annual Hospitality Excellence Awards. Charleston House Hotel received 3 nominations. I wasn't expecting to win anything. Simply being nominated felt like an honor. When they announced our hotel as Historic Property of the Year, the ballroom erupted in applause. I walked onto the stage with Marcus beside me. As we accepted the award, the host asked if I'd answer one final question. I nodded. He smiled. "Ms. Brooks, after everything you've been through, what's the greatest lesson success has taught you?" The room became quiet. I looked at the audience. Business owners, hotel employees, young entrepreneurs, families, people from every walk of life. Then I answered, "Success didn't teach me who I was. It revealed who I already was." I paused. For a long time, I believed I had to prove my worth. To investors, to strangers, to my husband. I smiled gently. I was wrong. Our value isn't determined by whether someone else recognizes it. It's revealed by the choices we make when nobody's watching. I glanced toward one of the back tables. Ryan was sitting there, not beside me, not as my husband, simply as Noah's father. He smiled quietly. There was no jealousy in his eyes, no bitterness, only respect. I continued. A woman can be a devoted mother, a business owner, a leader, and still go home at night to rock her baby to sleep. The world doesn't get to decide which part of her matters most. The audience stood, not because of me, because they understood. After the ceremony, Ryan walked over carrying Noah, who was now toddling across the ballroom floor with the determination only a 1-year-old could possess. "Daddy," Noah laughed as Ryan gently lifted him before setting him back down beside me. Our son reached for both of our hands. Without thinking, Ryan took one. I took the other. For a few seconds, the 3 of us simply stood there, not as the family we once imagined, but as the family we'd chosen to become. Different, imperfect, honest. Ryan looked at me. "Thank you for never using Noah to punish me." I smiled. "He deserves better than that." "So did you." He nodded slowly. "I know." Sometimes people ask whether I regret not exposing Ryan publicly during my speech. The answer is simple. Number. Life exposed him far more effectively than I ever could. The truth didn't need my anger. It only needed time. If there's one lesson my journey taught me, it's this. Never let someone else's opinion become the measure of your worth. The people who underestimate you are often revealing the limits of their own vision, not yours. Success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about becoming the kind of person who no longer needs their approval. And forgiveness? Forgiveness isn't forgetting what happened. It's refusing to let yesterday decide who you'll become tomorrow. If my story touched your heart, I hope you'll carry that lesson with you. Treat the people you love with respect before success, failure, or regret has the chance to teach it for you. And if you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or made to feel invisible, remember this. Keep building your life with integrity. One day you won't need to tell the world who you are. Your character will speak long before you do. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Consider sharing it with someone who may need this reminder today. and subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories about resilience, dignity, and quiet justice.